This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to Disabled Persons Assembly's Notable Radio Show. DPA is a systemic advocacy organisation run by and for disabled people. DPA is a pan-impaired organisation with members across the country. Over the next half hour, we'll discover how we can work collaboratively to achieve inclusion for all New Zealanders. DPA's Notable Radio Show, a whole new attitude.
Kia ora, my name is Amy Taylor and I am the local kaituitui or community connector for DPA Disabled Persons Assembly. In the studio today we have Leanne Stuff. Leanne is from Epilepsy Otago and she is an educator, so she helps to teach people how to deal with cases of epileptic seizures. So we're going to talk to Leanne today about her work and how this influences the community, how people with epilepsy manage in our community, and I'm sure we'll have time for some interesting tidbits as well. Hello, Leanne. How are you doing today?
Kia ora, Amy. Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's lovely to have you. The sun has come out in Otipoti today, which is quite exciting since we had dreary weather yesterday. Briefly, can you introduce yourself and your role as an epilepsy educator for Epilepsy Otago?
So basically I'm an educator working to support the community to understand epilepsy and also for people with epilepsy so that they can have some support and education wrapped around them. And basically we identify as Epilepsy New Zealand. In Otago, I am it for all of Otago and have quite a large area to cover. And so I will support people virtually through having a virtual meeting or via telephone, or I will drive out to rural locations to meet with people and do training or support people with a new diagnosis of epilepsy.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm glad that support is available. It is a big area for you to cover, though. Can you tell us, for those who don't know, what is epilepsy?
Epilepsy is a condition that is characterised by recurrent or spontaneous seizures. Basically, you kind of, for a lack of a better term, you could kind of think of epilepsy like an electrical storm that's happening in somebody's brain, and the person doesn't necessarily have control over it. So, it is a medical condition, and in some cases it can be disabling for people, but otherwise people with epilepsy can live normal lives, yeah.
So my understanding is some people respond better to the treatment than others.
Yeah.
So what are the common causes and types of seizures that people might experience?
Well, the common causes of epilepsy, the causes might be quite varied. For example, someone might have epilepsy in their family, so they could have something genetic that might predispose them to having epilepsy, or somebody could have, for example, a brain malformation or some type of injury to the brain that could have actually caused the epilepsy. But in a lot of the cases, the common cause is actually unknown. In the seizure types, generally seizures are classified into two types, to be generalised seizures or focal seizures. So, and we can probably explain that a little bit more later. But yeah, they do tend to have a lot of different types of seizures in the generalised category. So epilepsy doesn't always look like what you would see on TV. So yeah, it can look very different for each individual.
Yeah, I've certainly seen children having seizures, and if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So how is epilepsy diagnosed and how is it treated?
Epilepsy is diagnosed through a doctor or a neurologist, and part of the diagnosis process would be them taking a history and looking at how many seizures that the person's actually had. And sometimes the person might get a MRI to rule out any brain abnormality, or they might have an EEG, where the little dots get put on your head and they're measuring the electrical activity of your brain. And so that's part of the diagnosis process. And they would also look at treating the epilepsy with medications.
Great. So are there any common myths or misconceptions you'd like to clear up? One of the things I'm really curious about is I've heard of things called non-epileptic seizures. What are those?
Yeah, non-epileptic seizures. So that's obviously that's not epilepsy. So a seizure that's classified to be non-epileptic could be, for example, somebody could be having a seizure for another cause. So another cause of a seizure could be an electrolyte imbalance of the brain.
Okay, interesting.
Or it could be if somebody's fallen over and hit their head and sustained a concussion, and a symptom of that concussion might be a seizure. So that's not classified as a person having epilepsy. And also non-epileptic seizures sometimes can be functional neurological disorder, and that is where the person is has a condition, and generally we treat all the seizures the same. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I've don't currently experience symptoms of functional neurological disorder, but I have in the past, not seizures, sort of more limb weakness and things. But it can be it's a very diverse and complex diagnosis.
Yes, yeah, definitely. But another myth is that not all seizures are actually caused by flashing lights.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that say, oh, someone has epilepsy, make sure their lights are not flashing. And in fact, the people with photosensitivity as a trigger for the epilepsy, that's quite rare, but it still exists. And a lot of people hear about the flashing lights, and they start to feel quite panicky and frightened that they're going to have their seizures triggered by it.
Okay.
However, that might not actually be the case for them. So if they do have photosensitive epilepsy, then generally they're going to know about it. And somebody would make them aware that a strobe light was going, or there was they were driving through the trees and the light was flickering on their face before they went into a seizure. So that's another myth. But another myth too is that people can't actually swallow their tongue.
Yes, that was something really in the past. People used to put spoons on people's tongues, didn't they, and hold them down.
Yeah, I did hear of somebody recently talking to me on the phone saying that their family are really quite worried, and they've been trying to open the person's mouth while they're having the seizure and trying to reach in to pull the tongue out.
Oh, gosh.
And so that they were worried that they couldn't do that, because sometimes the jaw is quite clenched during a seizure, and sometimes the person's breathing can be impacted. But the tongue really is just going to make the person snore, and it can contribute to obstruction of the airway, but you can't actually physically swallow your tongue. It's impossible.
Well, something to learn, hey? Okay, so moving on from that, let's talk about living with epilepsy. What does daily life look like for someone who lives with epilepsy?
For most people live a normal daily life. Other than that, they would have to take medication and just be mindful of their triggers. So, for example, if the lack of sleep was a trigger for them to have seizures, they would have to have a really good routine and some strategy to get around that. But in some cases, daily life can be quite difficult for people. and they find it quite challenging to overcome things like side effects of their medications, such as fatigue, or impacting their mood, or just their social circumstances and feeling quite isolated. And that can really impact people with epilepsy, with their mental health quite significantly. So it's important to treat everyone normally who has epilepsy and just maintain that social connection to maintain their well-being.
Oh, that sounds very important for anybody. Let's face it. I mean, we all need to look after our mental health. So if you've got some triggers or some other things going on in your life, I mean, that's especially important. So the other thing that I would like to talk about is on that daily life thing. I've heard that some people with epilepsy can't drive cars. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, yes and no. Generally, if you've been having seizures, you will be stood down from driving for approximately 12 months until you've received a medical clearance that you are seizure-free and your epilepsy is under control. And so that can be very distressing for people, and it can impact their lives quite significantly. So we can support people with epilepsy to get out and about, especially by having a total mobility card.
Yes, and there's a lot in the media at the moment. The disabled community is very fearful that this government is going to pull funding from the Total Mobility Scheme.
Yeah.
Incredibly stressful for our community.
Yeah.
So what kind of emotional and mental health challenges are common? We've spoken about this a little bit.
Yeah, anxiety is actually quite a common one. Anxiety, depression, and grief. So if we look at anxiety, there's a lot of factors around the unpredictability that some people experience when they have a new diagnosis. They're not sure when their seizure is going to come on. They might not be aware of their triggers, and they're worried about how other people are going to treat them, and how they're going to feel knowing that they're waking up and they've had a seizure in front of people, and the distress that it might cause family members. So that in itself, the anxiety there, that's really quite difficult, and worrying about when's the next seizure going to come. The depression, generally that can be really quite difficult for some people. Sometimes that can be due to a lot of isolation and quite a sense of helplessness that they can't. Maybe they're worried that they can't control their seizures, or potentially that they are having very difficult seizures to control, and it could be that isolation really contributes to that level of depression as well. Yeah, but grief is also another thing there for people, which can lead to anxiety and depression as well. Because when people have a significant diagnosis like epilepsy, they're having something big change in their lives, and so for some people, for example, if they had a career as a helicopter pilot, they can no longer do that with a diagnosis of epilepsy, and so sometimes it might impact people's roles at work, and so they might have to think about while they're working with epilepsy, they might have to maybe change or modify their role, and in some cases they might have to change their job. And for some people who are impacted more significantly by their epilepsy to the level of disability, they are grieving the loss of a lifestyle, and so it can be extremely difficult.
Yeah, all these things are incredibly relatable, I'm sure, to many people in the disabled community, that sort of mental health. If you have come into being disabled, having previously been able-bodied, there is a huge adjustment period, and it can really depend on your community and your supports on how you actually manage with that adjustment period.
Significantly. And raising awareness of epilepsy and getting more people talking about epilepsy helps kind of normalise it and let people understand it, and so it reduces that stigma and encourages more community support around people.
Oh, we're always all for reducing stigma and encouraging more community support. This is something we advocate really strongly for. Us just accepting that people with significant medical conditions or disabilities are just people.
Yeah.
And they have the same needs and wants as everybody else.
Exactly.
So let's talk about safety and awareness. What should somebody do if they see a person having a seizure?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that that you and the person are safe, and so the person's not hurting themselves. So, for example, if the person's on the footpath, they're potentially safe because the traffic isn't oncoming. But if the person is at home, you might want to move some furniture away from them. So keeping the person safe. And then after that, you've made sure that they're safe, you really want to have a look and see whether or not they have a bracelet on their wrist to say that they have epilepsy, so that kind of lets you know that this is normal. But if you don't see a bracelet on the wrist or anything to indicate that this person does have epilepsy, get an ambulance straight away. A lot of the time, people with epilepsy would prefer that, well, generally we encourage as well, if you're supporting somebody having a seizure, just to time the seizure.
Okay.
And make sure that it doesn't go on for very long, no longer than about 5 minutes, or whatever your friend or colleague tells you. They might have a 3-minute rule, but generally in a first aid perspective, you're going to keep them safe and time the seizure for about 5 minutes. And then you're going to get help if the seizure is prolonged.
Wonderful. Well, I've learned something. I would have had no idea. I mean, my experience with seizures is generally a friend's children, and they don't seem to last very long, and all you can really sort of see, like, they spread their little hands out and their eyes roll a bit, and it's very, actually, if you weren't really concentrating on them, you might not even notice that there was something different. Is that the same for adults, or is it different? It
looks different for everybody. So not everybody is going to do exactly what they do on TV. And as I said, there was 2 main seizure types, a focal seizure and the generalised seizure. And so for a focal seizure, somebody could be maybe staring off and picking at butterflies or smacking their lips, or they might have some awareness of what's going on to their body, and they could be sitting there talking to you with maybe their arm is shaking or their leg is shaking and they've got butterflies in their tummy, and they're able to say, oh, this isn't right, or they might start to talk nonsense. So
interesting.
Yeah, so a focal seizure can look quite different. A generalised seizure impacts the whole of the brain, and you might see somebody drop to the ground and go stiff, or you might see them actually shaking. And that's the most common type of seizure that you might see would be the tonic-clonic type of seizure. But there are other types of generalised seizures, such as absent seizures, where the person might sort of blank out for maybe a second or so, and they could have frequent clusters of them. So it can be quite, you might notice that the person seems a bit off and they just stop their conversation. And then there's other seizures where somebody might have jerking of the arms and just, they throw the cup of tea off the table, and they just really can't control that. And or the person might actually have what we call a drop seizure, which is otherwise known as an atonic event, where somebody could be just walking down the street or walking through the office here and appear to be like a puppet with their strings cut all of a sudden.
Oh, wow. And gosh, that must be difficult for everybody watching as well.
But they recover exceptionally, as quick as the seizure happens, they recover just as quick. And so
that's remarkable.
Yeah, it's not a faint or a trip. It's an atonic seizure. So so they can look very different. So we'd like to really make sure that people are safe, and you're thinking about just making sure that they haven't hurt their head, and
Wonderful. Oh, well, I've learned so much. This was not something I knew a great deal about to begin with. So, it's always really interesting when you get guests on the show that are so sort of informative and so knowledgeable. So I think it's just about time for us to wrap up. So we'd like to know where listeners can go to get some more support. Well, what are your contact details?
Yeah, so basically we've got a web page. We've got an Epilepsy New Zealand web page, so you can have a look on there. And for myself, my contact details, you can email me directly, and that's otago@epilepsy.org.nz, or you could dial an 0800 number, which is 0800 Epilepsy, and that translates to 0800 374537, or you can also send me a text message on my mobile, and I can reach out to you and we can connect, where I'm on 022 321 5304.
So that's Leanne Stuff, and she's from Epilepsy Otago, New Zealand. We just need to just talk about a takeaway. What is one thing from this conversation that you hope actually sticks with people?
Yeah, I would like people to talk about their epilepsy with their friends and whānau, and if you know somebody with epilepsy, I want you to reach out and just ask questions about it, learn more about it, find out how you can support somebody with epilepsy, and what are their needs when they're having a seizure, what do they want from you.
Oh, that is really wonderful. And I think that is something that I personally advocate really strongly for, is that people, you don't need to be over the top and talk about your medical condition all the time, but make sure that those are the closest to you do have some understanding, because they can help you if you find yourself in an emergency situation.
And especially with a bit more understanding, it reduces the fear and the stigma around epilepsy. So more awareness is always a good thing.
Wonderful. Right, I think it's just about time to say goodbye. This is Amy Taylor. I'm your host on DPA Notable Radio. We've had Leanne Stuff from Epilepsy Otago today. She's an epilepsy educator. And if you just scroll back a few moments, you'll be able to grab her contact details and get in touch if you need to. As DPA Notable Radio, ka kite and goodbye.
Disabled Persons Assembly is Aotearoa, New Zealand's first pan-disability national organisation, providing system-level advocacy for all disabled people. Membership is free for individuals. If you'd like to know more, visit our national website at www.dpa.org.nz or contact your local kaituitui or community connector, Amy Taylor, at kaituitui.otipoti@dpa.org.nz. Disabled Persons Assembly, a whole new attitude.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.